Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to another episode of my F1 22 My Team Career Mode. This is episode number 71 today for the Australian Grand Prix, round 1 of Season 5. If you guys did miss the pre-season episode ahead of this new season, then be sure to go check that one out before you see this one, just uploaded yesterday, and get clued up on all the different driver transfers and the preparation for this brand new season, because Lotus have entered Formula 1 once again. And if you did catch the pre-season video, you'll know all the exciting context, including Jenson Button's involvement in them returning to the grid. And of course, all the other storylines going into Season 5, as we have Audi Sports spearheaded by now the 6-time reigning world champion Sebastian Vettel alongside Carlos Sainz. Still the strong showing of Leclerc and Russell for the Silver Arrows this season. Repsol Haas, now an established top team with Drogovic and Valtteri Bottas. Piastri and Gasly at Vodafone McLaren Mercedes. Lando Norris jumped ship to Red Bull, now in all white. Andretti in their second season in Formula 1 with Fernando Alonso and Liam Lawson. Max Verstappen, very excitingly, joining Scuderia Ferrari, and the return of Daniel Ricciardo to the F1 grid with Renault. Porsche Williams on the up potentially with Magnussen and Ocon still at the wheel, and then Hulkenberg, our second driver, returning to the F1 grid. Yep, certainly a very exciting lineup for this brand new season, but there were so many other moving parts, so yeah, definitely go check out the pre-season. But as I said in that video, everything gets reset to 0 and you go again. The only thing that has carried over from last season are the actual car performances, because we did not have an R&D regulation change and reset of any kind, so a lot of the teams have actually improved over the winter break. You know, you can see, you know, a lot of improvements for the bottom 4 teams of Ferrari, Andretti, Porsche, Williams and Aston Martin, but also small incremental improvements for Mercedes and McLaren, and we're very much already nearly at maxed out cars for the top half of the grid. You know, ourselves, we've maxed out the powertrain, we've maxed out the aero department, we've only got 3 brake upgrades on the chassis, which I may avoid because we know the brake upgrades can be a little bit dodgy on the F1 games. So really the only other department that isn't included in the R&D graph is the durability side of things. And of course we did have a major issue in this department with 6 failures in 16 rounds. So I'm going to be spending most of my R&D points in this early part of the season on the durability. But then, to be honest, we kind of almost want to not be spending any R&D and saving it, because I can guarantee you I'd be very surprised if there wasn't an R&D regulation change now later this season going into Season 6. So we need to kind of future-proof ourselves for that season this season by not spending too much else. And like I said, we won't want to, because the only other upgrades tangibly there are the brakes, and I've always been a bit skeptical about those actually improving the car, because the brakes seem to feel worse the more you upgrade them. So pretty much near enough, we're already at a maxed out car, and most teams are going to get to that by about halfway through this season. So really this season it's going to be about the drivers, their focus and momentum making the difference. And then obviously, you know, track to track, certain cars and chassis will, you know, suit the circuit. So it will kind of be a case of race by race, figuring out who's quick on the Saturday, then into the Sunday, and there's no real form book, as it were, as maybe in the past when you had 1 or 2 teams clearly quicker. So an initial pecking order is what we're going to find out today for the very first time on Saturday here for the Australian Grand Prix. And the first time we are driving our brand new Lotus AAR F1 car in anger. Styled after the Lotus 25 that took Jim Clark to 2 Drivers' World Championships, and his namesake and those 2 championships are on the side of this car, and we'll be hoping they can give us some good luck going into this season, because we're going to need it, having come off the back of what happened in Season 4. But we're trying to put that behind us and not think about that too much and worry about that kind of scenario. We've switched engine suppliers, now powered by Honda, and hoping that that choice of PU could be the one for us this season. But we kick things off here with a familiar name at the top of the sheet, Felipe Drogovic, having so much confidence off the back of that breakout season for him and Repsol Haas. But it's a horror show for for Red Bull, as Alexander Albon, one of the championship contenders last season, is knocked out in Q1 in a dismal P20. Lando Norris only just makes it through into Q2 and P16, so whether they're still getting to grips with their car, both of them had massive traffic, I don't know. It's a very tight grid, very closely packed with 22 out there, but that is still really not on for them, and they're way off the, well, where the likes of their rivals from last season are. McLaren up there, Audi Sport as well. The Mercedes still not showing their true hand. They are technically just about the best team on the grid, apparently, according to the R&D chart. So let's see what Q2 could hold for us. Of course, now with the different tyre allocations ever since that latest patch in the game a month or so ago, we only have one set of soft tyres for each session. So this is the end of the session. We've left it late, but we've got the confidence and we've got the pace to go P1 in Q2, but let's see if we can try and carry that pace over into the important top 10 shootout. But both Audi Sport cars make it through, as do the Repsol Haas cars, Mercedes and McLarens, and that unfortunately will leave both Red Bulls out. Lando Norris only manages P13. Perez couldn't quite get that Renault into the top 10, and Ricciardo on his return to the F1 grid, unfortunately, is even further down the order than his teammate. But to be fair, if you look at the R&D chart and where everyone's placed, to be fair, Red Bull are kind of around the area where Lando's qualified, P13, you know, because there's now that many teams above Red Bull in the R&D graph that it is actually very stiff competition for the top 10. Verstappen can't do much better than P15 in that Ferrari. Still some way to go for the fourth bottom team on the grid. Kind of weird to say for Ferrari, but they've still got lots of work to do to try and get that car back to where it kind of truly deserves. But here we go now, out as the sun comes down for the final session here on Saturday. It's Q3, the top 10 shootout. Myself and Tsunoda both through, but like I said, it is very steep competition. You know, you've got both Repsol Haas cars. They're going to be quick. The Audi Sport team, they have a very quick Sainz, who was rapid at the end of last season, and the reigning champion Sebastian Vettel. And I'm still waiting for Mercedes to really show their hand, because I thought this might I got the feeling this season might be theirs, where they actually start to show up again ever since, like, what was it, season 2, when Hamilton won his 8th World Championship and then retired, of course, at the end of season 3. And then what is going to be of McLaren? They were arguably the quickest team overall consistently over the course of season 4, but they tripped over one another, didn't make the most of it, and in the end of it, Lando fell out of the championship fight, and now, of course, he's been replaced by Oscar Piastri, one of the home favourites. Let's get back to focusing on this lap in Q3. I thought it was a very decent Sector 1 and 2. To be honest, I think I was a little bit timid on the accelerator in Sector 3, not wanting to spin the car out and get it unsettled, and that has cost me time, and we're only P9 for this grid. You would have thought we were aiming for the front row or the second row at least, based off Q1 and Q2, but like I said, I think I left too much time on the table in Sector 3. We only had that one lap in Q3, so the nerves did get to me a little bit, wanting to just not stuff the car into a gravel trap or on the grass, and it means we're actually now behind Tsunoda even on the grid, alongside Piastri on that row, and it's Felipe Drugovich that gets his first pole position of this season, and it's familiar names at the top: Drugovich, Vettel, Gasly, and this is what I mean by, because we're getting now to most cars with maxed out performance, it really is the drivers making the difference, and that focus and momentum that they have is going to carry them over. So that's why you see familiar names that did well at the end of last season doing well at the start, but we know, you know, the start of the season may not, you know, mirror what goes on to the end. It's early days, it's only round 1, but it's very good showing for Drugovich and the reigning champ Vettel on the front row, but very quick cars behind them of Gasly, Russell, Sainz, Bottas, and I'm hoping myself and Tsunoda. And I think there's going to be another spanner in the works here, because going into Sunday, I believe we have some rain on the way for the first round of this championship, so that is going to really shake things up. Let's go to the grid for the Australian Grand Prix.
No more testing, no more practice. This is the real deal, and it's make or break here at round 1 of this year's Formula One World Championship. We're a stone's throw from the enormous Port Phillip Bay for today's race at the 3.28-mile Albert Park circuit. It's a bumpy racing surface here, and the 14 corners could prove especially difficult in the wet conditions. So watch out for a safety car at some point during this Grand Prix. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Felipe Drugovich lines up on pole position, with Sebastian Vettel starting alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Gasly, Russell, Carlos Sainz and Bottas, Tsunoda, Leclerc, the owner driver and Oscar Piastri, Perez, Liam Lawson, Lando Norris and Magnussen, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Fernando Alonso and Mick Schumacher, Ocon, Albon, Stroll and Nico Hülkenberg rounds off the grid. It's almost time for the lights to go out, so let's head down to the track where preparations are underway. The rain is falling today as battle commences for the World Championship once again. They've done very little running in these conditions, of course. Natalie Pinkham, this could make a mess of our expectations coming into this Grand Prix.
That's very true. If you want to mix up a motor race, a little bit of water on the circuit will do the trick nicely. The key to success today will be ensuring you're on the right tyre at the right time and making sure you can get them up to temperature.
The rain is here, and it is here in a heavy amount. We've got the full wet blue wall tyres on every car on this grid for the beginning of this season, just to add just a little bit more spice. There wasn't enough apparently already. The F1 gods want a bit more. So an opening round of a wet race, that's always a very interesting one. You know, you never really know what the order is going to be like, what the race pace is going to be like at the beginning of any season, let alone then the added layer of the rain. A real equalizer where maybe drivers can make even more of a difference now individually compared to their cars, or vice versa, the opposite, and have an absolute howler. Let's hope that we can navigate this well. I have set up the car for this race. I put on way more front wing and rear wing than I usually would have in a dry situation at the beginning of qualifying, so may have compromised my one lap pace in the dry, but hoping that will pay dividends now in this race today. So an exciting new season has an even spicier beginning potentially here, but we are ready. Lotus is back in Formula 1. Let's see if we can do them proud as we go to 5 red lights. So the beginning of season 5, the Australian Grand Prix is underway very tentatively as we all try and tiptoe off the line as the spray comes towards us. We're going to try and find some space on the outside of Tsunoda. Leclerc has tried to dive down the inside of Bottas, but in the end the Finn pinched him out, but we're up into P7, so all things considered, pretty good getaway actually in the conditions, to be honest. But now we've got Leclerc coming back at us with a dive on the inside, but we're just going to keep it nice and easy and just try and keep this car going in a straight line. You know, first lap, just pretty much don't bin it, and then we can go from there and get into a groove in these very tricky conditions. As now I see Piastri and Tsunoda side by side. Piastri trying to go down the inside of our teammate. Meanwhile, oh my goodness me, life has flashed truly right in front of our eyes as we had to go complete opposite lock. The steering wheel was upside down as we caught the rear end as we try to get the power down. There's so much standing water in sector 2. I gotta tell you, through my steering wheel, it was like the car was kind of on a rail because the water was controlling where the steering wheel was wanting to go, and you're kind of having to steer against where the water's trying to steer the tyres. Very much not a great experience. I almost thought my wheel was actually a bit broken or the game was broken, but no, there's just so much water that I'm trying to steer the car right, but it's understeering left. and vice versa. Through this subtle left-hander, I'm constantly having to turn a lot more left than you usually would because the car is veering right. But through all of that, we've still got some pace here, catching up to Bottas, but all the while dancing the car through the corner exits, trying to keep the rear end as stable as possible. Having a little look on the outside is now Russell defending against Sainz, Mercedes and Audi, an early battle, potentially a battle that could run and run for the entirety of this season. But we're looking to try and get past Bottas. We're a bit desperate to, because I can sense he's a bit slow here, and the Finn going a lot slower than his teammate, who still keeps P1 ahead and sets the fastest lap as he goes on to lap number 3 now. So it is Drugovich that leads the way off pole position. Vettel very close behind in second, followed by Pierre Gasly in third place. Then there's a bit of a gap in the battle we've now joined, I guess, between Russell, Sainz, and we're hoping to get in the middle of it, but Russell is looking for a stern defense versus the Audi car, but unfortunately doesn't seem to have the pace here in the wet to keep up with the top 3 drivers. So, you know, if that doesn't speed up, we're going to have to try and look to cut through both of them. But meanwhile, behind, Tsunoda has been overtaken by Piastri. He's up into P9, Tsunoda down to P10. Then a bit of a gap in Lawson holding up a whole train of Perez. Lando Norris in his new Red Bull in P13 where he qualified. The Red Bull just not working very well at the start of this season, followed by Fernando Alonso, Magnussen, Verstappen in the Ferrari down in P16. Still so much work to do for them, and Ricciardo on his return down in P17 ahead of Ocon, Schumacher, Albon down in P20, very odd to see, and Hulkenberg brings up the rear in the double Aston Martin at the back. But back to our POV, lap 3 in sector 3. Sainz is all over the back of George Russell, and he's moving to the left. Russell defends the inside, and we're going to use that to go down the inside of our former teammate, the one we've had so many frosty battles with in season 4, and we caught him napping basically, and we're up into P5 now. So good work there from us, because he was way too focused on Russell and just simply left the door wide open for us to go down the inside. But now we're going to try and overtake Russell, and we've seen with our own 2 eyes how difficult he's making life for cars right behind him. But a little lock-up into that right-hander, and Sainz is actually the one attacking me on the inside, and you know how poor we've been through that long right-hander in this sector. The car starting to aquaplane. We're going to try down the inside. Contact made as Sainz squeezes us right off the road there, and he was having none of it. So no love lost clearly between us 2 drivers from last season. I actually checked for damage because I was very worried about my front wing being nicked there, but we're fine, and we're going to have to go again and try and re-overtake him. But these 2 are now losing me a lot of time to the top 3 drivers. We're going to go for a very similar move down the inside of Sainz, but I thought we could get a 2-for-1 maybe on Russell, but then the back end gets the better of me in 3rd gear. Just got a bit too overconfident on the throttle pedal, and Russell keeps ahead, and just showing how tricky the conditions are, you know, constantly having to make adjustments on the steering wheel, opposite lock to catch the car, and just that nimble little twitches here and there that are very subtle but feel very real with the force feedback in my steering wheel, I must say. But now we're right up the back of Russell, and this seems like a very crucial moment in the race. We need to get past our fellow Brit, because he's a lot slower than the top 3 guys, and you know the podium is getting away from us now, but we just can't manage it on the outside. Probably not the best way to go, but Russell's been covering off that inside line so well. Meanwhile, behind, Bottas is continuing to struggle, and he's now the head of a massive train. And to be fair, this might be a bit of Bottas being slow, but also just how close the grid is with everyone so close together in terms of performance. You know, this is a train all the way down to like P16 and 17. Meanwhile, you're seeing me weaving about aggressively to try and break the toe from Carlos Sainz, but that's a train from Bottas, P7, down at least 10 positions to where Verstappen is. So it's going to be some very interesting racing if the rain is to perhaps stop and slow down, which I think it is, because I've had a few radio calls about the rain being heavy for at least a couple of minutes, but then may get towards intermediate. So if that does come, an even dry period, that could be quite spicy for that battle behind us. But can we get Russell? We sent it on the inside. We just kind of almost get frustrated and just had enough. And I just went for it, to be honest. And whatever happened was going to happen in that corner. Thankfully, Russell just doesn't have any confidence. But that lack of confidence may just be a Mercedes car that does not work very well on the wet, because now Sainz has a great slingshot go at Russell. Dives down the inside, but Russell's slow. Yellow flags. I think Russell's going slow, and I think he's got a problem. And now Bottas crashes into him. The front wing flies up meters into the air, and it's George Russell that pulls across onto the grass to retire, to be the first DNF of the season. I mean, at least it wasn't me. I'll just say that, to be honest. But Valtteri Bottas has now got no front wing, and the safety car is out for the first time this season because of that debris and Russell's stricken car. And Bottas is going to be way down the order now, because under the safety car, none of us have pits for inters. It's still too wet for that. And so Bottas is going to have a rather long evening ahead of him. But now this safety car has given us a chance to battle for a podium. It was getting away from us with the gap these three had. But now I can see Gasly right in front of me. And we've warmed up the tyres as much as we can to try and get the best launch possible. And we do get an almighty exit, planting the power. ERS dumped all the way down the main pit straight, and we power past Gasly with ease almost into turn 1, up into P3, and it's almost like Gasly wasn't ready for the restart and didn't even think about myself being right up his gearbox. And so now we are into third place and have a chance to stick with Vettel and Drugovich, as on lap 13 you can see the conditions are still very tricky out there, as Kevin Magnussen has just flat out spun at the second last corner. It's elevated the likes of Verstappen up to P13, Ricciardo P14, and the conditions are even trickier now, because technically it's getting towards intermediate, but we're all still on the full wet tyres, so the water, the tread is a bit too high for now what the conditions are. So we're all too stubborn at the moment to pit, but sooner rather than later there will be a point where we have to pit, as you see me almost sliding our way through that right-hander, trying to keep within 1 second of Sebastian Vettel. As now we watch on, Lando Norris is slow in the Red Bull, and his white Red Bull is slowing up on the pit straight. It is not going to be a fantasy debut for the Brit in the Red Bull Racing team. It's going to be the polar opposite, a complete disaster, a farce for Red Bull, with Albon down in P16, and now Lando Norris going slow and looking to park up his Red Bull for P21, and he will be the second man out of this opening Grand Prix. I mean, the first race of the season, always a bit tricky. You never know what the reliability is going to say for any of these cars. So far, so good for us. Lap 15, just over halfway now through this 29-lap race. And now is the time to switch over to intermediates. We've called to box in this lap because a second safety car has been called out for that stricken Red Bull. So it's a free pit stop. And I've asked the weather report from my engineer, and he reckons it is time to switch over to intermediates. So got a double confirmation, my own feeling in the car, but also then the engineer confirming that. So we are going to pit under this safety car, even though my engineer just suggested to pit on the next lap, for the second lap under the safety car. A bit illogical, I don't know. Maybe Jeff's been talking to Mark, because they are working together this season. You'll hear both of them at some points through these races. But Drugovich comes in, Vettel as well with me, but Gasly and Sainz opt to not come in. A very odd decision. I guess they wanted to avoid the double stack, potentially, but all three of us from the top three are in, and Vettel jumps Drugovich. What a great pit stop for the Audi Sport Boys. They've jumped Repsol Haas in the pit lane. Drugovich has been leading this race the entire time, but now eventually, once everyone else filters out with their pit stops for intermediates, whether it's under the second safety car lap or after the safety car, Vettel will now take the effective lead of this race ahead of Drugovich. And it is indeed going to be P1 on the road now for Vettel, as we have now got the safety car coming in on towards lap 18. Bottas is in P3 ahead of me, and he's yet to pit and decided not to pit. So I don't know whether he's hoping for maybe the race getting to dries at the end of the race, and he's risked it because he's already had to make an extra pit pit stop, but he stayed on full wet tyres, and I guess we're just going to find out if this gamble is going to work out for the Finn. But for us, I'm a bit scared on this restart because I've never been good at restarts off intermediate tyres. Just can't get any temperature into them. No matter how much I weave about under the safety car, there's just no grip. I can't switch them on. It's been a legacy problem I've had with the intermediates this entire game, and it's just woeful as we're locking up into turn 1. We've not had the same exit, and now snaps of oversteer trying to collect the car to keep going in a straight line. Leclerc has now overtaken as Piastri sends one down the inside. It was 3 wide with the 2 chrome cars either side of us, and Piastri, one of the home favourites, he's loving life. He's up into P4 in his McLaren now. We've overtaken Leclerc once more to get back up into P5, and we're just desperately hoping that these tyres switch on again, because I know once they do, we're going to have the pace. But, you know, just every single time we're under a safety car in intermediates, I just know it's not going to be a great restart. No matter how much I've tried to get temperature into those rear tyres especially, just doesn't seem to work the same way as the full wets or the dry tyres, obviously, as a formality usually. Eventually, though, at the end of lap 19, 10 laps to go, there is now some grip coming to these inters, and more importantly, Bottas is really struggling for pace on those full wet tyres on a track that warrants the inters, and we're going to use him to block Piastri off and go on the inside. Piastri doesn't put up much of a fight though. Both McLarens haven't into turn 1. It's almost like they know that they're just there because of the luck they've had in the race, and they don't actually have too much confidence in these conditions. I don't know what it is, but both McLarens today have not looked very aggressive at all. And Bottas here, well, he just looks like a slowpoke on the full wet tyres. 4.3 seconds. Drugovich is away in second place. So this overtake is crucial now. Sling one down the inside, and now we have 9 laps to go to try and bridge 4.7 seconds to Drugovich and Sebastian Vettel. That's going to be a very tall order because both of them seem so bloody quick in this race. And quite the opposite is Valtteri Bottas at the moment, because he's just getting overtaken left, right and centre. Piastri got past immediately. Leclerc's now sent one down the inside and got ahead of him. So the Mercedes up into P5. Then, of course, the only sole silver arrow left in this race, Liam Lawson now may have a go, but he locks up and makes his own mistake. The Andretti goes wide. He's still in the points though, but he's down to P8, and Tsunoda benefits from that and is up into P7. So good stuff for our team. Not so much for Andretti, who are flying high in P7, but he's still in P8. Ricciardo now in all of this has managed to gain up to P9. What a return this would be to Formula 1 and his home race. And Schumacher finds his Ferrari in P10, just ahead of a very quick Albon looking to try and overtake him. The Red Bull in theory should be much quicker than that Ferrari, but you know, weirder things have happened so far in the race. So you know, quite a few people benefiting then from that free pit stop and a lack of, you know, judgment from some drivers not to come in under that second safety car. Meanwhile, lap 22, you can see myself, Vettel, Drugovich all trading purple lap times. Vettel goes across the line purple, then Drugovich, then myself, and so you can see why it's difficult to bridge the gap, because they're going just as quick as I am. I just got to hope I can somewhat keep up this pace, and they can't. And by the time we get towards the last 2 laps of the Grand Prix, lap 28, that is what has happened. Vettel and Drugovich are losing pace, but there aren't enough laps left in this race. I don't think we'll be able to fully catch them by the time we get to the checkered flag. Meanwhile, there is fighting going on behind for the last couple of points there. Bottas on the full wet still. The dry period has not come, and he's blocked Schumacher so much that Albon has managed to steal the point away from the Ferrari. Albon's in P10 now. Perez making it 3 wide. It's Renault versus Porsche versus Audi. This is amazing to see. Round 1, so many different teams battling each other all the way down, up and down the grid. You know, that's not even for any points, just for some pride basically. Later on in the season maybe, if it comes down to where they finish with no points, I don't know. But Schumacher will be upset, down to P11. That's unfortunate, but maybe there might be one last little twist in this tale, because Bottas surely is going to be so slow on a pretty dry track, you know, semi-inter to dry tyre if there was, you know, maybe a couple more laps in this race. Meanwhile, we see Magnussen having a massive scrap with Sainz. Sainz, and Sainz is the one that comes out on top. But look at that. Look how many cars are all together on the second last lap of the Grand Prix. I know the wet is probably definitely equalising them a little bit, but I think also it is showing how close this grid is. Alonso having a go at Ocon, his former Alpine teammate. We know how that could probably end out. Andretti versus Porsche, and then the Renault having a go at the other Porsche of Magnussen as Perez tries to get one more position, and Schumacher looks to try and keep on the back of Albon in case he makes a mistake. But back to our POV as we're now a long way ahead on the circuit, going into Sector 3 now, and you can see what I mean. We're close, but we're not close enough. A purple second sector, the fast lap of the Grand Prix, but we probably need at least 5 more laps in this race if we wanted to have a go at Drugovich and maybe Sebastian Vettel, and so it's going to be close, but not close enough. We're going to have to settle for 3rd place, and for the second time in a row, Sebastian Vettel, as a reigning world champion, is going to win it down under. This time in Season 4, he took this very Audi sport car to the top step of the podium, and he does it again in Season 5. Vettel wins the Australian Grand Prix from Felipe Drugovich in the Repsol Haas, and we can pat ourselves on the back for a very, very decent race. A podium in the first one, tricky conditions, not ideal for a first round, made the most of it, and we survived it.
A great race then, and a fantastic victory here at Albert Park. Natalie Pinkham, how do you think they were able to set themselves apart today?
I think it was clear what the main contributing factor out of the track was: speed. It sounds like an awfully reductive statement, but fast cars win races, and we saw that today with our winner.
It's a bit all too familiar, this. Sebastian Vettel, now 6-time world champion, winning back-to-back Australian Grand Prix. And, of course, continuing his win streak from last season, because he won the last race of Season 4 at Abu Dhabi. But things are different, because we've got a Repsol Haas now in 2nd place from the get-go at the start of this season. And Lotus are there in 3rd place. On their return to Formula 1, we got the name on the podium. That is a great achievement, and things behind this podium are very different. So although the winner is the same as the beginning of Season 4, things and the landscape of this Formula 1 grid are so different. Norris, Russell out of this race. They'll be so gutted. Bottas in the end had a howler. He had to pit right at the end on the last lap onto intermediate, so he was out of it. So that gamble didn't pay off. It's a great day for, you know, debuts for McLaren, for Piastri at his home race for McLaren, and some great racing out there by the likes of Lawson and Tsunoda to get some good points there, I must say. And also Daniel Ricciardo on his return to Formula 1 gets in the points. So a lot of good feel stories here, and that sets us up for a very interesting season, because the racing specifically all the way up and down the field, it was so close. So if it just stays like that, then we are probably in for some really exciting races later on in Season 5. But guys, that has been round number 1 of this brand new season, our 2nd season of the V8 era on F1 22. If you have enjoyed it, hit the like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.